Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Russell Gay. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Management and David W. Wilson Chair in Business Ethics. Welcome to the Faculty and Staff Ethics interview series. Joined today by Jenny Connolly. Jenny is the Academic Advising Manager in the College of Business for the past 4 years. Before that, she was an Assistant Director of Admissions for 8 and started her UNI career as a Residence Life Coordinator before that. So she's a past member of the Board of Regents during her student days at UNI. Both of her bachelor's and master's degrees are from here, and we're going to talk today about various ethical issues in academia, and who knows where we might go from there. So Jenny, first of all, thank you for doing this and welcome to our show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Thanks. So let's obviously start on the academic side, and I don't know necessarily where you want to go as far as that goes, but within your role, you pretty much have a role with something with all of our students. So, I mean, ethics is a normal capacity for you. And I know you're on a number of committees and whatnot. So tell me kind of where you want to start this and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think when we think about staff, especially when we think about ethics, about whether or not we're guiding students for the right reasons, right? So is it because it's the right fit, or is it because we want to meet a certain benchmark or a certain number? I don't know. There's just a lot of things that sometimes staff aren't really sure we should be doing and pushing.
Sure, that's fair.
But also like, well, we have to do this.
Right.
So yeah. I don't know. I think back a lot in my admissions days. This isn't unique to you and I, but whether or not we're letting in the caliber of student who can turn around and be successful here, right? We want to be access and open. We want students to be here, but we also want to make sure they're going to be successful here. And I know that's something that a lot of institutions struggle with, and it may not even be because of the student, but whether or not we've got the right scaffolding built in place for them to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was always interesting in that part of my career. And in this part of my career, it's whether or not we have the student that should be in that certain major, or should we pivot to something else, or maybe even pivot out. But from an economic mobility standpoint, we know what a business degree can do for you. So there's just so many things that we have to think about all the time.
Yeah. So if a student picks a major or is thinking about a major, and just based on their past classes and things, you don't think it's probably the best fit for them. So you're pretty upfront with them about that?
We are as a team, and sometimes the student will listen and sometimes not. I mean, I have a student right now.
The same way for us on whether they listen to us or not.
So yeah.
Welcome to the club as far as that goes.
I know. And it's like, if I'm telling you about this and your faculty are telling you still don't listen.
Right.
I don't know. But yeah, we do. And sometimes it's one of those things where they have to try it themselves.
Sure.
And so, we can tell them about all the support networks that we have, but also sometimes we're also really honest about what that class will look like. If you're not someone who really likes math and analytical thinking, then you shouldn't pick a couple of our majors. If you're someone who does not like to write and does not like to have critical thinking conversations, then this major may not be for you.
Maybe not my leadership class.
That would be one of them, sir. So having those conversations with students, they don't always like to hear it, but we also feel like it's ethical for us to give you the real world picture. I mean, we don't want you walking in blind. And if you still do and want to ignore what we've told you, fine. But then we feel like we've at least done our due diligence.
And I can certainly understand those that still decide to try it. I mean, I wouldn't want to look back 20 years later, still kicking myself for not at least taking some of those classes and seeing if I could have done it. So yeah, I can understand why some would still decide to give it a shot, and can always retreat later on if you need to.
Yep. And I think another piece that is not new necessarily to us, but it's still something higher doesn't know how to handle is parents.
Sure.
And obviously there's FERPA, right? So you can't violate FERPA.
Right. Yeah.
But there are a lot of conversations you can have with parents, because they can be a really good advocate. They can also be not. But a lot of times they can be a great advocate, but there's that ethical side of, having them understand maybe what you thought your child should do versus what they're actually
Right.
capable of or have a passion for. And sometimes there are things I'd love to tell parents, but I can't.
I know some of my colleagues are dealing with parents more lately than they ever have in the past, and I'm sure I'm about to jinx myself by saying that I've never had to deal with that from one of my classes. So yeah, I'm sure I'll regret that in about 10 minutes when I get an
Yep.
email from someone.
Yep.
But for you, I mean, is it more, I don't know if you deal with it a lot, but is it at least more common now than it used to be in the last few years or further back?
Yeah, I would say it's grown.
Okay.
Partially is because of just access with Zoom,
Sure.
right? So whether or not I can,
Zoom
chat.
in the class?
I mean, yeah, right.
Yeah, I guess that's easy if they're at home and it's an online course. Yeah.
Right. But also just appointments to talk about, how
Okay.
to be successful or, if their student is struggling or whatever, all of those pieces makes the technology side makes it easier to do. Now,
Sure.
flip side of that is that because it's easily accessible, we do have more that want it, but you have to have the student okay it. There are
Okay.
still
Well,
things
that's
we just
good.
aren't going to tell you
Right.
regardless. So yeah, and I don't think that'll go away. I think with the cost of college, it it just won't ever go away. Parents have a much bigger stake in it than I think they
Sure.
have ever had before.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Tuition costs, I don't think will start to go down too much anytime soon. So,
No. No, and I feel like, I mean, that's political, but I also wonder some of the ethics on some of those things too, of what we expect students to take on with a burden and what are they
yeah.
going to do afterwards. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, and even beyond the political notion, I mean, just with the inflation rates we're looking at for literally everything now, thanks to the pandemic. Yeah, I don't
Right?
think any prices on anything will be going down anytime soon,
No,
unfortunately. Yeah.
no. And I was a kid the last time it really happened, like any sort of giant inflation thing. So we're just all learning this all together
Yeah,
in our
absolutely.
house.
Absolutely. I
So
agree. I agree.
yeah.
What about the notion of cheating?
Mm.
Do students talk about it much when they're talking? Do you hear much about that from the academic, the advising side of things?
I think most of us would tell you no because they
Okay,
know that we'll tell on them. That sounds really funny, but like as soon as we get wind of something, we're passing that along to the people because we don't want to be,
sure,
in
sure.
trouble for anything. But I do think there is a little blurriness of what students view cheating as,
Absolutely.
right? And so, yes, if you have a copy of a test and things like that, I would hope that you think that's cheating.
Yeah, a little more extreme in that example.
Right. But there is a lot of students, if you're sharing notes, if you're taking notes together on a Google Doc and things like that, is that cheating? Is it not? Are you doing homework together? Are you doing your online quizzes together?
Sure.
Um, I don't know. I think there's just a lot more blurriness, and I don't even know if I know the right answer to some of those
Well,
things.
and some of it depends on the class and what the
Yep.
professor has specifically said or not too. So yeah,
Yeah.
some of those examples you gave very well might be cheating in my class, but not in somebody else's or vice versa. So yeah, it
Yeah.
depends a little bit on that.
Yeah. I remember an incident when I was a student and we all did a giant study guide together because it was
Mhm.
so big. We all kind of like took chunks. This is way before Google Docs, right? This is like a
Sure.
regular Microsoft Word doc you emailed
Yeah.
to each other. But our professor did not like that and very much viewed that was cheating. And we were like, well, this was just a smarter
Oh,
way to divide it all up, So I think students again really need to be mindful that it is up to each faculty member, which I think it's hard for a lot of students to just remember and keep straight.
yeah.
Um, but no, we don't get told a whole lot about cheating because again, I think they realize we will, as a part of our ethical duty, we'll tell on you.
I'm still thinking about your group study guide. I get so I'm I don't think I have a problem with it, but the one thing that I might have had an issue with is if there's, let's say there's 4 students who just refuse to take part, then don't share it with, if they weren't willing to take part
Right,
in helping, then I would say I might have an issue if you were to share it with them also.
right,
But then you could say maybe you didn't invite them to take part. So who
right.
knows? I mean, even then we've got the gray area on that. But yeah, I've never really thought of this. In fact, I recommend students study together before my
Mhm.
exams and whatnot. So Yeah, I think that part to me is fair at least, but certainly there's many, many, many other gray areas where it's not so clear.
Well, and I'm also fascinated with what students use to study, right?
Hmm.
Like Quizlets and
Hmm.
creating all of those things together now. Um, they're think smarter, not harder sometimes. And I don't know. I think there's some people that might view that as cheating or,
Right,
unethical, but that's the way of technology now. There's only so much that you can fight with some of those things.
right.
So,
I'd gotten an email a few weeks ago from one of the academic, I won't say what, but the note-taking type
mhm.
software tool companies and asking if I'd be willing to, they would pay, but willing to share my notes and everything for my classes so they could just post everything on there. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Needless to
Yeah.
say, that was just a simple delete. Didn't even, I
Right.
thought about responding to go off on them a little bit, but I didn't even do that. I just decided to delete it and leave it at that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was certainly concerning to me, to say the least, out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think the pandemic, has really forced people to decide what they want to do. And sometimes I think we are having a lot of students who are choosing a really easier way out. Like, I don't have to go to class, I can just watch the video. And you're like,
right.
no. And
Exactly. Yeah,
that's
it's
not
not the
necessarily
same.
cheating, but it's also not, you're not taking advantage of your education in the way you should. And
Right,
I don't know.
right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I think we've come a long way in the online classes, but certainly if the class is taking place in the classroom still, then skipping it and just watching a recording. And not everybody's doing their recordings,
No,
those, and I don't think I have a problem with that necessarily either if it's a face-to-face class.
no.
So
Yeah.
there's
I
that
don't
issue
either.
that we'll probably contend with for the long-term future now that students have seen the whole online notion during the early days of COVID and know how easy it is to
Mhm.
do that. I'm sure they'll be asking for more and more flexibility
Well,
in terms of that.
and then on the flip side of that, there were a lot of students that liked being able to go back and watch the recording
Right.
after they've attended class. And I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great relearning tool, but it is more for faculty to do. And I don't know. It's hard. I don't know what the workload line you get to and what you decide is worth it. And,
Right. Yeah. I don't know that I'll have so I still, as you know, teach online due to some health issues. So I'm still online anyway. I don't know when I get back to the classroom if I'll turn the Zoom component on. I've thought about it a few times, but haven't made any decisions there
yeah,
on how I feel about that notion once everybody's back in the classroom. So I'll
yeah.
have to see what happens when that does take place. But yeah, certainly can see the pluses and minuses involved with that situation too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where else we want to go in the academic world?
Gosh, I don't know. Our ethical stuff with staff really lies so much in guiding a student on, sometimes we work with students and they've tried and tried and tried and tried. And that ethical side of, yes, we want you to stay a certain major because of numbers, but then I need you to graduate,
Sure.
but there's that ethical line of how long do we let you go before we really have that hard conversation. There are some institutions that, like, at a certain amount of credit hours, if you're not making it, you have to switch.
Right.
And we've talked about that, and it's very split amongst the team of like, what is that threshold? Um, and so I don't know. It's just interesting to think about what some people, even in our office versus across campus,
Yeah.
view as how long you should go before you have to switch or have the hard conversation.
Okay.
I'd be interested to know what faculty think on that. Like, how long would you let a student go?
Well, I've never had this happen, but I know some of my colleagues have had like a student in their class 3 or 4 times trying to pass or get a high enough grade to be able to move on.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's always troubled me a little bit. I mean, yeah, I'm torn on that standpoint. I mean, obviously, if there's a different professor teaching the class, maybe you could try that route.
Yep.
But I mean, even if you do then pass it, if it took 4 times to do it and it's a fairly basic
Hmm.
core level course or something, yeah, I'm not sure I'm that optimistic that it's going to result in successful later on. as you get
Yeah.
into some of the upper level courses. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's especially now with the pandemic has caused issues for a lot of people and other challenges in life too. So maybe a little bit more flexible on my thoughts on that the last 2 years than I would have been before. But
Yeah.
still, I think at some point we've just got to maybe just change gears on what that major is, what that career
Yep.
path is going to be. I mean, if it's that much of a challenge now, it's only going to get harder in the real world when you're trying to do those things
Right.
too.
And actually, that brings up another piece when you talked about being flexible. Like, what is the ethical line of how you support a student versus
Absolutely.
challenge them?
Mhm.
Our freshmen right now, their last normal year of school is when they were sophomores in high
Right.
school.
Yep.
And they're struggling, but at a certain point, you need to go. Like, you just
Mhm.
have to power through this. But
Yeah.
the world is still kind of on fire. So,
Right. Right.
so we're struggling with that line too of like, okay, how long do you keep pushing, but also you have to just adjust. I don't know.
Sure. And from an employer and career services standpoint, I mean, we'd hear before at times that students are great technically. They know their major courses really well, but it's the communication and their personal skills they struggle with. And that was before the pandemic even. So certainly
Right.
now for some, that has become even more of a critical component or they're lacking, unfortunately.
Yeah. And those are hard skills to teach, and it's hard
Yeah.
skills for.
You've got to be willing to crash through that comfort zone and
Mhm.
just put yourself out there and see what you can do. It's not easy. I was one of those very introverted undergrads too. I remember there were a couple classes I had dropped. I was able to find them with other professors, but that I had dropped the original one because there was too much speaking. And that
Huh.
sounds so odd to me now because I know how much speaking I make my students do pretty much on a daily basis. But part of that is because, yeah, I do realize how much of a challenge college can be until you force yourself out of that comfort
Mhm.
zone. So it's a different
Yeah.
world than it was back in the dark ages when I was in my undergrad world. But
Back when we had real phones and
yeah. I mean, I was doing one of these the other day. I don't remember who it was with now, but I was talking about going through the undergrad program with no internet for me. It was brand new. I was just comfortable with the library, so I would still go look everything up. I mean, I didn't know better. This internet thing, whatever, it'll disappear soon. It's a fad. So so yeah, I had gone through my undergrad days pretty much at the library all the time and checking out books and going through books and then got on my first job and it was like, all right, so go search for this online. I'm like, what are you talking about? So it was the crash course then. And thankfully it was just getting started at that point anyway. So it's not like it
Right.
was a long way behind. But yeah, who knows?
Uh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Student,
Ethics.
it's
Whoops, go
different
ahead.
world. What?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I started to cut you off.
No, I was just saying it's just such a different world for them
Yeah.
now, like we laugh about like even just the technology students use now from when I started in this job to now, right? Like TikTok. That wasn't a thing 4 years ago. If it was, nobody talked about it,
Right.
and that's a primary platform for them now. And
Exactly.
Snapchat, I mean, even texting students, they don't do that, right? Everything's via Snapchat. And
Right. Yeah, they don't even like Facebook at all much anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. Which I've never had a Facebook account, so I don't mind that.
Well, it's kind of a dumpster fire, so you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. I always thought I'd just waste too much time, so I never went down that path. And now LinkedIn's becoming too much time for me too. But oh well, at least I enjoy that one. So,
You post good stuff. I like to read what you
trying
post.
to. Yeah.
know,
Thank you. Thank you.
That's good stuff. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other ethical things. I think as a profession, there's a lot of unrest with a lot of what student affairs type of staff are asked to do
Sure.
in terms of the pay and the hours and the things like that. I don't know. And I think this is the world of work everywhere, right? Like, I don't think it's just colleges or universities, but staff are done and they're walking away at a higher level than we've ever seen before. Kind of like
And for
teachers.
those on here that are all college of business related and don't realize, I mean, student affairs, you're doing recruiting events in the evenings and early mornings and weekends on a regular basis. So the whole concept of a normal 8 to 5 type schedule doesn't really
Right.
exist in a lot of ways in student affairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm lucky. I've always worked for people who have been really flexible.
Okay,
But that's not the case for a lot of student affairs
sure,
professionals across the state, across the country,
right,
and
right,
they're done.
yeah,
I was listening to a NPR this morning and they were talking about the John Deere strike, but then they started talking about other places that don't even have a union and people are just walking out.
yeah.
I don't know, you as an HR professional, like this will be interesting to maybe not this conversation, but like,
Well, and the numbers, I mean, the last 2 months, I had posted this last week, the last 2 months, it's 8.3 million people that have left their jobs voluntarily. We're not talking about people being fired or retiring or anything. We're talking about just voluntarily saying, goodbye, I'm
done.
done. I'm going to go do something that's more enjoyable with my life. And I mean, that's a big number. I mean, a lot of the estimates out there are saying best case scenario, it'll take 3 years for companies to recover from all the resignations they're seeing. And for some, they don't know that they'll ever catch back up. So
Which
it's
then
not
makes you
something that's
wonder from an
going away
ethical,
anytime soon.
yeah, from an ethical standpoint, what are you not doing? What can you do to change?
Yeah,
You can't make everyone happy, right?
never,
But I
never.
think about for student affairs professionals across the country of, is it flex hours? Is it remote work opportunities? Is it, what is it, right? Like there is no perfect job, I don't think, but
Right.
is there ways we could shift? I don't know, you know?
It'll take a lot of creativity, a lot of flexibility. Yeah, I think there's a lot of retention things companies are starting to do right now that are great, but the way you started this topic, you're never going to please everybody. So
Right.
just because I think as an HR person this is a great idea, our employees are going to love this and want to stay, well, just because I think it doesn't mean they all will either. So, and
Yeah.
eventually, yeah, we can't just cater every program on a one-on-one basis to make each person happy with what they're specifically looking for. That becomes an issue too, and a level of fairness and ethics too. So,
Well,
yeah,
and
this is going to
salary
be an ongoing
compression,
battle for a while.
salaries are an issue if you want to start people higher, but then are you paying the people that have already been doing the job more? I mean, yeah.
And that's certainly not a new one there. That's been going
No.
on for a long time. I mean, somebody that's brand new into a profession in today's world might be making 20 or 30,000 more than somebody that started 25 years ago and is still there and has grown every year. I mean, it's just the way that the markets have dictated that. And absolutely, that brings up fairness and ethical questions along those bounds as well.
Fix that, Dr. Gay.
True, true. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think the students and our colleagues and community members and whoever might watch these will all enjoy it.
Thank you so much,
You're
sir.
welcome. I'll talk to you soon.